an overview of the new RPA class, so you are more than welcome to take notes. Will did send me the new RPA, and as long as he gives me his final yes, you can, I think I will be putting that into the chat box for everybody. Let me just make sure I can do that. I think I should be able to. And if not, I'll just email it to everybody when this is over so that you guys have a copy of it. I think we're also recording this so that you guys can get back to it, but I will also confirm that with Will. I do also want to call out that this is meeting style, as you guys can see. It is interactive, so you can ask questions. We just please ask you to be respectful about raising your hand or putting your questions into the chat box. Kind of being conscious of if your microphone is on, those types of things. So if you have any questions, comments, put them into the chat box or raise your hand, and either myself or Will call on you as we were going. Any other ground rules, Will, before we get started?
No, I think that's about it. Let's make sure here that you can see my presentation.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, we'll give everybody one more minute or so. A question for you, Jody.
Yes.
I was getting my copy of the contract here, but are you able to put the PDF of the contract itself into the chat for everybody?
You know, I tested my my settings before, so I'm just going to see if I can do that. Where did I put it? I saved it in a safe place. There it is. Let me see if this will drop into here. It's not letting me drop it in, even though I said I can share files. It won't drop in, but I can email it to everybody, or do you want them to have it while we're going?
It would be really good if they could have it.
Okay.
So let me do this. Let me try this.
I don't know why. Oh, you know what? Let me throw it onto our website really quick.
Okay.
And make a link, and then I will put it into the link. So give me just a moment. Maybe you want to introduce yourself and start going while I do that really quick.
We will start that in a second, but let me see if I can find my version.
And then just so that I'll ask you this question, because some people may walk away from this thinking, okay, I just heard from Will, I don't need to take the training with.
No. This is just this is not training you on how to do it.
Yep.
Let me hold on one second.
And that's what we put, just so you guys know, you know, again, we put in the marketing. This is not intended to be an in-depth training. This is an opportunity for you guys to see it so that you can sign up. And Dave, I see you there, Dave, and I apologize kind of for what I'm about to say, but as you guys know, it doesn't matter if you take it with SC.O.R. It doesn't matter if you take it with Silvar, Bay East, C.A.R. themselves. There will be a charge, unfortunately, to take the new RPA training. If you have questions, concerns, or comments about that, I would encourage you to contact C.A.R. Education directly and let them know. It's not something that I set. It's simply to cover our costs. So please know, everyone, that you know, we're covering our costs as an association. Don't contact Dave Walsh. There's nothing he can do about that. But I'm just being upfront about it because we're getting a lot of questions. But again, this is not meant to be a training. This is not meant for you to walk away and say, yay, I know the new RPA. So that's where we're going today.
All right, so I just want to confirm one thing, that everybody was able to get a copy of the new RPA in the chat. I put it in the chat. Hopefully it's there.
Cool. Yep. So you should be able to see, you guys, and you should be able to click a little download button and it should download.
No, I don't have it.
And to answer Jean's question, somewhat interactive. Thanks, Kelly. You can ask questions. You can put them into the chat box and those types of things. It's meant to be able to ask questions if you have them. So you can either use your raise your hand, which is in all kinds of different places, depending on which version of Zoom, to be honest, you have. Sometimes it's under reactions, sometimes it's over where participants in chat are. If you turn your camera on and wave at me, I'll see you, or just put your, Virginia, if you look in the chat box, we'll do it again. And I'm gonna put it online so I can also put a link in here. So
Perfect.
if you look in the chat box,
Yeah, everybody
link-
go ahead and look in the chat box. I actually put it in there twice.
Yep.
So it should be in there. Kelly said that she was able to get it.
and I'm working on the link. So give me a
Alright.
few minutes to get the link and I'll just throw it in there every once in a while.
All right, beautiful. All right, let us get this.
It's not in my chat.
You may have joined afterwards. So give me a second and I'll send a link.
No, it's just my chat. I don't get a lot of downloads in my chat for some
No
reason.
problem.
All right, I just put it there a third time. And we're working on that link. All right, so we've got 37 people here. Okay, well, thank you for coming, everybody. Let me get my screen back up and going. Hopefully everybody can see it. All right, so let's get started. So we are here today, and again, thank you, Jody. We're just talking about the differences between the two versions of our RPA. The one that you're currently used that was revised in 2016, and we can continually added things to it and revised it, but that's still considered the 2016 version. And then the version that's going to be coming up at the end of the year in December. So yes, Jody is absolutely correct. You're going to need to take your training through C.A.R. first. That's just the way it's going to be. We have no say in that. But today we definitely wanted to make sure that at least, our association gets at least this, this very basic overview of what's going on with the new contract. So why is Will doing it? Well, as an introduction, this is who I am. So 2019, I was the C.A.R. vice president. 2020, I was chosen to be the vice chair of the Standard Forms Advisory Committee. That's the committee at C.A.R. that oversees with the legal team and staff all of our forms. And this year, I am proud to serve as your treasurer. Next year, I will have the honor of serving you as your president-elect. And Dave Walsh is on the call. I want to thank him because I was this year the chair of the Standard Forms Advisory Committee. And I got to tell you, for 2.5 years, I have had the best experience in my career. I've always kind of been a contract geek. It's just definitely something that's in my wheelhouse. And I was able to work with the RPA study group. And the RPA study group was the group that was formed by C.A.R. leadership to start the process of rolling out a new and revised contract. So when I teach contracts, I always tell all of my students that, whether it be the listing agreement or the purchase agreement, any of the C.A.R. forms, if you were a lumberjack, the lumberjack knows every inch of his axe or her axe. Well, these are our axes, folks, and we should know this is where our money is made. This is how we're able to serve our clients well when we know these contracts inside and out. And as I talked about it before, the RPA study group, I just wanted to make sure that I always acknowledge this was just such an amazing group of people. The immediate past chair is David Kerr, and the past chair was Sherry Frejean. And then below are the members of that study group. Now, who are these people? Well, we had 7 members from Southern California, 2 of them from Central California, 8 of them were from Northern California. And those people, the ones that actively sell homes on a day-to-day basis, they're averaging 3 to 4 deals per month. And then those that manage, they average 70 files per month. And then the average years in business of the group was 28 years. So as you can see, we got a, really good group of people that, not only practice every day, they're going over contracts every day for their offices. Quite frankly, they've been in the business for a long time. We have a couple of people there that had been in real estate in California long enough to remember when it was just a one-page contract, which in itself is kind of scary, but of course, probably didn't have as many lawsuits as we do now. And the firm sizes, we went with the small independent guys from 3 people to, folks over at, Compass that have thousands of people in their offices. During that process, we did get regular updates to the legal affairs forum, and that forum was mostly broker defense attorneys or brokerage in-house or outside counsel. An escrow group was also formed by members of the Escrow Institute of California. We had members from the California Escrow Association itself, California Land Title Association, and a group of lenders. So all parts of the contract, we had industry leaders that definitely participated and advised the group on the way to go. So let's get into the nuts and bolts here. And looking at the chat, nothing so far. Beautiful. All right, so what's the same? Well, the transaction process, it's going to be business as usual, guys. We're not changing it at all. The initial deposit, the loan application and verification, setting close of escrow date, the buyer gets the chance to investigate the property and have that as a contingency. They're still going to have their loan contingencies. We're still dealing with disclosures and closing in possession, allocation of cost. All of those things are going to remain the same, even the final verification. We're keeping active contingency removal process. That's fair to both parties, so that's going to remain the same. The notice to perform process remains the same with some one slight tweak that I will highlight later. The optional liquidated damages and arbitration clauses will remain, giving the parties choices. So don't forget, if everybody does not agree to it's either an all-in proposition. You can't have one party says that we want to do it and the other party that says that we don't do it, and then, you sign the contracts and you have a ratified contract. No, everybody has to agree to be either all in or all out on mediation and or arbitration. Mandatory mediation does remain, and this of course avoids potential costs and delays of an adversary dispute resolution. So let's take a look at what's new and, in our opinion, what's better. So the format, the first thing you're going to notice, other than looking at it and seeing that it's 16 pages, the first 3 pages, it's all there for you. It's at the beginning, so it's easy to read, easy to understand. It's in a grid format. That grid, if you go into zip forms, we've got what is it called? The summary of offer. Take a look at that. Start using that now. If you're going to be writing offers between now and I'd say November, start using the summary, because it's going to start giving you a feel for what it's going to look like. Only liquidated damages, arbitration, and counteroffer terms remain in the body of the agreement. So there's no separate summary form needed anymore to quickly find relevant terms. The grid is part of the contract, increasing the chance that the substantive clauses will be reviewed. Of course, that's going to mean no fumbling around to find negotiating terms, reducing the chance of missing something. No struggling to find detailed paragraph terms. There is now a quick reference in the grid, making it easy to direct client without having to flip through each page just to find that clause. And then no being surprised by a hidden checkbox or inserted number change. And this was a big thing when I started. I always loved using it, and they took it out. But who remembers the until designated loans were funded? That used to be a hidden checkbox where, somebody would think that you were removing your loan contingency in 14 days, but if you check that box and they didn't catch it, you didn't really remove the contingency at all. You're just saying that everything is okay, but it's not going to be removed until, back then it was like 2 or 3 days before you actually closed. That's when it funded. So that little checkbox was there. I loved using that checkbox, and it used to give me a way to see, if the listing agent, was checking the contract in its entirety. Now, all contingency periods now default to the same time period. So if you notice now, we've got one contingency period that's 21 days and the rest are 17. No more. They're all going to be the same time. So changes to time frames are now easy to identify. There is now more space between lines and paragraphs and added subparagraphs. Again, just making this super easy to read. There's a clearer designation of what items are included. You've got separate addenda, not an entire contract anymore for mobile homes, probate sales, tenancies in common, and stock cooperatives, and tenant occupied properties. So we feel that that's a great thing. So now, yes, it's 16 pages, but now you don't have to go to get a mobile home contract just for the mobile homes. Everything is going to be done on this one contract, and then you're just going to add addendums for your probates and your mobile homes, your TICs, etc. So we're consolidating everything and making it a lot easier. We reorganize the paragraphs so that they are logically grouped together. The big move on that, and somebody came up with this analogy that I thought was just brilliant. In 2016, they came out with at the time it was a new RPA. You got to look at it as this. The RPA was like a house, right? And the parents, they built the house, and it was a great 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch style. Then, you know what? One of the parents, getting old, they decided that it was time to move, a parent in with them. So what do? They add an addition. Addition, okay, it was a needed addition. Oh boy, now one of the kids needs to move back home. So we're going to add on, a second story above the garage. Okay, function-wise, it's absolutely needed. But what happened to the house? The flow is all messed up. And that's what happened with our old forms. So we have now reorganized everything that it just flows so much better. Contingencies and disclosures, liquidated damages, and arbitration clauses are boxed to not miss those initials anymore. The order of the paragraphs are no longer disjointed, and everything just flows supernaturally. And we reorganized the signature paragraphs. We got a lot of complaints, and we heard you. So easy to identify if the subject to seller counteroffer or a backup offer. The entity signatures are built in, eliminating the need for most RCSD forms, those representative capacity forms. We're trying to eliminate the need for most of them, but not all of them. Yes, Laura, we will provide copies of the slides when we done. And Jean asks, when it comes to the probate sales, will there still be a probate contract? And if not, who will inform probate attorneys that it's no longer used? So yes, there is going to be a probate addendum, Jean. You're just going to add it on to this 16-page contract. So it's not a separate contract, but you're going to be bringing in an addendum that makes this now a probate contract. Same thing with tenancies in common, etc. All right, in the real estate broker section, it's now easy to identify if multiple agents, such as a team or even a co-brokerage, because we're seeing that happen a lot as well. And easy to identify electronic communications such as email, addresses, or text numbers. There are risk management benefits to the new contract as well. Visual impact and perceived / real content changes may cause more licensees to get educated. Yeah, that's what we're really hoping for, because a lot of, the group would get a lot of questions. We got a ton of questions after the spring C.A.R. meetings. We met once a week for almost 8 weeks straight. We had almost 700 items that we had to go through. And yeah, when you send in a question or comment or concern into C.A.R., it goes to the Standard Forms Advisory Committee, and they do read over every single one of those things. And a lot of the questions that we got were, quite frankly, what we said were educational items where, they will learn this when, it's time for training. No longer have to hunt and peck to find changes or be embarrassed or have to pay if you didn't. That's the worst thing. You miss something pretty easy and you're the one that ends up having to pay for it when you have to pay for it. And Kimberly asked a question, can you please clarify that when days, the RPA states amount of days, it's calendar days. What about when there is a holiday? We do talk about that. And when I take a little bit further, a further deep dive into it, that answer will be there. The current RPA does also talk about that as well, but we'll get to that a little bit later. We also had over 60 ancillary forms that we had to go over as well. So some had required some changes and some required no or totally minimal changes. So some of the forms that we did take a look at, the disclosure regarding real estate relationships, the seller affidavit for non-foreign status, commonly called the FERPTA, also known as the AS, the trust advisory, septic well, property monument, and propane form. That was a new form that we came up with last year, particularly for those in super Northern California and your more rural areas that don't have sewer systems that are provided, via public utilities. And then the backup offer form and the addenda itself. Let's see, Kimberly continues her question. Glide adjusts for holidays. Want to find out if there is a feature that will adjust. You are the feature that will need to adjust. That's something that Glide does that, we've kind of said, what are you doing here? That's not, some things are counted during a weekend, usually not holidays, but some of those dates do count over a weekend period. All right, others have already been updated or will be before December. That's the cooperating broker compensation agreement, the statewide buyer and seller advisory, which were scheduled for release this past June. So any questions before we really get into the RPA itself and some of those items that I had talked about? So it's 1:23. We are right on schedule. And let me go to the quick grid view here. Okay, looking at everybody's faces. I don't see anybody asleep, which is good. All right, so brace yourself, folks. Contract time is here. So the visual impact and perceived or real changes, we talked about that already. You don't have to hunt and peck around. All right, so let's take a look at this, and hopefully everybody's got a copy in front of them or they can open it on a second screen. So paragraph 1. C, we've got the terms of the purchase. The purchase price is moved now to 3A. The close of escrow moved to paragraph 3B. And paragraph 3B, new language was added to address when the site address and mailing address are different and the buyer is advised to investigate. So I've dealt with this twice over the last year on some of the properties that are in Campbell, where it's a Campbell mailing address, but it is considered a part of the city of San Jose. So we want to make sure that was put in there. I know they deal with that a lot in the city of Pasadena. And again, as I'm saying that, I want to make sure that everybody realizes that, there's going to be things that we talk about in this contract that you may never touch in your real estate career, remember, we are dealing with, a huge state, and it was a Herculean task years ago. And I think, I've heard stories that, different parts of the state had their own contract, and C.A.R., moved the needle to get, one statewide contract. So for me, one of the great things about being on that study group and then chairing the Standard Forms Advisory Committee was just learning about how different people do real estate in the different and many regions of our state. I mean, shoot, people do some of the practices that they do on the, in the East Bay or in Sacramento are really different than what we do here in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley per se. So we added that in there, paragraph 2C, identification of the second brokerage company representing the buyer or seller if it's two brokerages. And the close of escrow default is blank days after acceptance with an optional fixed date. Paragraph 3C, the expiration of offer, clarifies that time to accept offer starts when all buyers, and it didn't do that for me. That's not good. Hold on a second. So that it should have said clarifies when all buyers and sellers ratify the contract. Paragraph 3D, initial deposit as a percentage of purchase price. Explanation that the percentage is a calculation is for calculation purposes and does not automatically change with the purchase price adjustments. Paragraph 3D2 talks about the increased deposit, calculates increased deposit as a percentage of purchase price. Explanation that percentage is for calculation purposes and does not automatically change with the purchase price adjustments. Explanation of increased deposit, defaults to payment on removal of contingencies with the option of a fixed date. So Jean, if you look at paragraph 1B, where it says the property, go all the way where it says assessor parcel number, it's right underneath there.
I think in the slide, it actually said 3B. That might have been the confusing part instead of 1B. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you are correct. That should be 1B. I'm sorry. Yes, you are correct.
No problem.
And Will, I was putting the wrong link. I was putting the link to sign up for Gov. So I'm about to put the link for the new RPA itself. Sorry
Perfect.
about that, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, Jody. And so we're still on page 1 here. Paragraph 3E, number 1, the first loan. And this is going to calculate the loan amount as a percentage of price, defaults to buyer to pay 0 points if the FHA or VA automatically attaches that a mandatory clause which makes the contract contingent upon appraisal, and the HID form HUD recommended to get an inspection. Paragraph 3E number 2, the additional financing section calculates the loan amount as a percentage of the price and defaults to the buyer paying 0 points. Going to the next paragraph, it's the occupancy type, options to check secondary home or investment as use of property. So that is a bit of a change. Instead of it just saying, do you intend or not intend, it's saying if it's a secondary home or an investment for financing purposes, that can be a big issue. Paragraph 3G, the seller credit, calculates seller credit as a percentage of the purchase price. Explanation that the percentage is for calculation purposes again and does not automatically change with purchase price adjustments. The default, that credit will be applied to the purchase price. Paragraph 3H, number 2, the verification of down payment and closing cost. Again, it's going to default to attach to the offer, which is again different than before. Option for 3 days after acceptance is still there. Paragraph 3H number 3, again, the verification of the loan application, defaulted again to attach to offer, option for 3 days after acceptance. And you've got 3 choices. If it's a pre-qualification, a pre-approval, or a fully underwritten pre-approval. So again, you're seeing that we've gotten into some really good changes here. Especially dealing with the hot market that we are currently in, and although it's starting to change, that was something else that we had to take into consideration as well. We don't like revising, these things every year, every other year. It's usually on a 5 to 7 year window, and we wanted to make sure that looking forward, when the market does change, that this contract still would work for all, for both sides of the transaction. So paragraph 3I, intentionally left blank. Why? Because the letter I looks like the number 1, and that can get confusing. Paragraph 3K, assignment request. If buyer wants to assign, buyer needs to make a request in 17 days or seller disapproval is deemed reasonable. Paragraph 3L number 1, the loan contingency, 17 days after acceptance. Again, like all others, that was the one that used to be 21 days. It's now all uniform. Paragraph 3L number 2, the appraisal contingency, either purchase price or a set amount. Paragraph 3L number 3, informational access, explicit language that access to the property itself is not a contingency. Paragraph 3L 4 through 7, review of the seller documents. That's the prelim, the common interest disclosures, the review of leased or lien items. So we've put explicit language in there that the contingency lasts for 17 days or 5 days after receipt of the items, whichever occurs last. Paragraph 3M number 1, time of possession, defaults to the notice of recordation with option for set time on either close of escrow or when seller occupant leaves after an occupancy agreement. Paragraph 3M number 2, seller occupied or vacant units. If the box for the SIP, that's the seller license to remain in possession, or the RLAS, that's the residential lease after sale, checked, then form auto attaches. So we're making sure that those forms, if you click anywhere on this contract to add a form, it should automatically attach itself. And yes, we are working still with Zip Form, the engineers, to make sure when the biggest complaint that we get is the text overwrite doesn't show up sometimes, or the majority of times. We are working on that. Gene Hunt asks, does removal of contingencies now eliminate the buyer's right to inspections for information purposes? No, it does not, and it never has. You can go in there you can go into a contract, Gene, with no contingencies, but you still reserve your right to inspect. There's no more negotiation. There's no more canceling if something should come up. That's why when you do that, you have deemed that you are satisfied with the condition of the property as it was presented to you. That's why you still have access, even though you remove contingencies, you still have access to the property for X amount of days. All right, page 2, paragraph 3 and number 3, tenant occupied units. If this box is checked, then the TOPA, that's the tenant occupied property addendum form, auto attaches. This form defaults to buyer taking property subject to tenant's rights. Paragraph 3 and 3, that's the installation of smoke alarms, the CO2 detectors, your water heating, bracing, etc. 7 days after acceptance, that the seller needs to accomplish all these tasks. Paragraph 3O, intentionally left blank. Why? Because the letter O looks like the number 0 and gets confusing. So paragraph 3P1, all of the items included. So we've got pre-check boxes for bathroom mirrors, because sometimes a lot of them are actually in older homes, they're actually glued to the wall. New options for wine refrigerators, because we've got some homes that are just super sharp, and they've got wine refrigerators, microwave, security systems, alarms, your video doorbells like your Ring and Sentry, security camera equipment, wall mounted brackets, above ground pool spas, electric car charging systems or stations. When will C.A.R upload the new documents in the library for use? Virginia, we will not release those until we release the new forms. So you're not going to see any of the new forms until the release date, which is going to be in December. But until then, you're going to use all the forms that are in the library right now. Great question. You're very welcome, Virginia. Let's see, paragraph 3Q number 14, the HOA transfer fees. Seller pays for separately charged move-out fees. Buyer pays for separately charged move-in fees. Any questions before we go on to page 4? All right, paragraph 4A. Property type addenda. So C.A.R. has eliminated the manufactured home purchase agreement and the probate purchase agreement because too much overlap with the RPA. Instead, there will be a manufactured home and probate addenda to the RPA. So this is a direct response to your question, Jean. Also, there will be an addendum for tenant occupied property. The default will be for the tenant to remain in possession. New addendum and advisories are created for tenancies in common and stock cooperative forms of ownership. So paragraph 4C, buyer and seller advisories. 2 forms that are bundled with the RPA will be pre-checked: the Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory and the California Consumer Privacy Act Advisory. There will be an option to add the Wildlife Disaster Advisory. So yes, 16 pages plus the agency addenda plus the CAA plus the fair housing plus the wire plus the what is the other one?
BIA.
The BIA, and then it's my favorite one. The possibility of representing more than one buyer or seller addendum. So yes, lots of stuff. But remember, always remember this. If you don't know this, I'm telling you this right now. Why do we add more forms? Quite frankly, and in all honesty, is because one of our fellow practitioners ended up getting sued and we lost. So we want to add these things to protect ourselves and our clients. Paragraph 5, initial deposit. Default method of providing a deposit will be by wire transfer. If anything else is specified, escrow holder must agree to it. Again, the escrow holder has to agree with anything other than a wire transfer. Paragraph 5B, increased deposit. The form to be signed at the time of the increased deposit has a new name. It's called the delivery of increased deposit, the DID. I think somebody was asking about that earlier. What does the DID mean? So this is an example of a form that won't be released until the new RPA is released. Did the buyer make an increased deposit? Get it. So you guys get it, right? DID, did they make an increased deposit? That's why we did it the DID. Paragraph 5C, 3, buyer loan status. In this new paragraph, seller is given permission to contact buyer's lender for purposes of determining the status of the buyer's loan. Seller may want to know to decide whether to allow extensions or attempt to cancel if otherwise allowed by contract. Buyer to give seller contact information to any buyer's lender, not just for the loan specified in the agreement. Let me repeat that, because I'm surprised I haven't seen a blow up in the chat box yet. This is a huge change. In this paragraph, the seller is giving permission to contact the buyer's lender for purposes of determining status of the buyer's loan. Seller might want to know to decide whether to allow extensions or attempt to cancel if otherwise allowed by contract. Buyer to give the seller contact information of any buyer's lender, not just for the loan specified in this agreement. So now this contract is literally saying, if you get in contract, buyer's agents, your buyers agreeing that they will be forwarding the lender's contact information to the seller, so that the seller, if the loan's not going right or it's taking long and nobody's getting back to the seller can now bang on the call, bang on the desk or whatever and keep calling those lenders. So that is a huge change. I just want to make sure that you guys realize this. Paragraph 5C, number 4. This is the FHA and the VA section. The FVA form used to notify seller of buyer's lenders requested repairs will be discontinued. Instead, the buyer should use the RR just like any other request. The RR will have a new section for the FHA VA lender requirements. So again, this is another change. No more form. We want everybody now to use the RR, and the RR will be updated in time for this rollout, that it's going to have a section just for the FHA and the VA lenders. So we're going to look at page 5, the occupancy portion. A reminder was added that whether the buyer owner occupies or not will impact the type of financing. Is there any area of the new contract that ensures seller's agent isn't abusive of the lender's contact information? Okay, that's a great question. So again, we go back to that. It's not the seller's agent. It's the seller that's going to be calling directly. Because remember, this is a contract between the buyer and the seller. So it's the seller that's going to be calling, not the seller, not the listing agent. Great question.
One question that I got, Will.
Yeah.
Has the term status been discussed or defined?
Status as in what?
I think it had to do with the previous one about the lender information.
You mean, the status meaning, is it pre-approved or whatnot?
I think so.
No, you're going to state whether you're going to have a, well, yeah, it could. Yeah. Any question really. If something's going on and, the people aren't being cooperative or getting back to them, that's when the seller is going to start wanting answers, and that's when they can start calling. Usually these calls only happen when a buyer's agent is not, relaying or communicating with the other side. I teach my team members, I teach our agents, hey, look, if there's no news, is still good news. And you report when there's no news, just so that people feel like you're being cooperative. Then you don't get, people, oh, well, we didn't know what was going on and we couldn't contact you. If you've got nothing to say today, send a quick note, no updates at this time. We'll notify you on X date at this particular time. A lot of the things that we see go south, it's because of a lack of communication.
One of the other ones, I guess, might be a follow-up. Is there a fiduciary responsibility due to the buyer or lender regarding disclosure?
That is a very broad question. I would like that person to be more specific.
So if the person who sent me the message, if you'd like to narrow that question down, feel free to raise your hand and ask the question. And then, yeah, now your questions are blowing. Now your questions are blowing up about this piece.
All right, so I'm getting questions here. Let's see. Can the agent call as well or asked by the seller? So if the seller wants to designate their agent, it doesn't say that you can't do it. So I would say that it would be allowed. So the seller can contact anytime. Is there no control on that? Well, this again, Gene, the seller is not going to call unless there's a reason to call. So if you're the buyer's agent, if you give updates very frequently, even if there is no update to the listing agent, there's really no need for that person to be blowing up that lender. Stacy Seymour, this is concerning. The seller could derail the entire transaction. I can see this happening if the seller gets a better offer after the current one is accepted. Well, if they get a better offer, then they probably aren't going to call to ask questions. They're going to send notice to perform. So you remember, you can sell a notice to perform 2 days before the actual contingency is due. You're allowed to do that. You can't send it 3 days before. You can only send it 2 days before, so that when that day comes and they don't remove contingencies, they can be booted, because at that point you've already served them their notice. So again, this should not be concerning if the buyer's agent, again, professionalism, if the buyer's agent is giving updates to that that listing agent, the seller should not have a need to call, right? And if you're working with a lender that doesn't get back to you, get a new lender. I mean, it sounds harsh, but it's true. Paragraph 7C, seller remaining in possession. A reminder was added that the parties should consult with their insurance and legal advisors for issues such as liability and damages to personal or real property. So we're moving to paragraph 8A, number 1, the loan contingency. If no appraisal contingency and buyer would otherwise qualify for the loan, failure of property to appraise, again, is not an excuse to get out of the contract. Seen that a lot. And again, this talks about education. People say, well, if we can't get the appraisal, then the loan's not going to get approved. No, they're two separate entities. So the follow-up to Jody's question, sure, the agent has a fiduciary responsibility to the buyer regarding disclosure. There is buyer information that the lender has that might trigger non-disclosure. Well, yeah, the question that they're going to ask is probably, they haven't heard from the buyer's agent. They haven't heard anything. They're going to call and say, what's going on? Well, the lender can only provide the information that's allowable. So they can say, yes, we're just waiting for an appraisal, or it'll close on a certain date. Those are the types of things that we can do. Absolutely, Gene. Gene's question is, there's a built-in assumption that the seller won't be calling unless there's no information from the buyer's agent. I see this as a way of forcing the buyer's agents to give regular updates on the loan process, and if that's not frequent enough for the seller, then the seller could bypass the agent and thus interfere. They're not interfering. If I'm the buyer's agent and I'm doing a deal with you, Gene, and I'm telling you we won't get an update for another day or another 2 days, if you call, then that's not controlling your seller, right? We've given you the update. We've been constantly telling you that we are all waiting. We're all waiting for this. And you want to sit down with your sellers and say, look, you've got this option. This is our last ditch option. Okay. Again, it's communicating with your principal. Paragraph 8B1, the appraisal contingency. Even though the appraisal may have property measurements, such items are part of the investigation contingency, not the appraisal contingency. Let's see. Paragraph 8E, number 2, if a revised preliminary report is provided, buyer may cancel if there are material deviations from the original preliminary title report. Paragraph 8G, review of leased or leased items. More specific, that paragraph applies to leases, maintenance agreements, ongoing financial obligations and property sold subject to any lien or leased or liened items. Paragraph 9, note to buyer and seller, items included are not intended to alter the price of the property, right? So if you put in a $15,000 Sub-Zero fridge in there, that's not necessarily going to be a determining factor if you wanted to get $15,000 more. Some sellers are impatient and may call without agent knowing. Again, this is when the agents need to sit and consult with their clients. Can you go back one screen? The very bottom said something about canceling due to appraisal. Oh, did I? All right, let's see if I can go back. Oh, I can. There it is. Yes, so thank you for that, Stacy. I did not realize that. So if the buyer cancels due to appraisal contingency, seller is entitled to a copy of the appraisal. Thank you. That's a new one. This is huge. We're putting it into the contract. If you say, oh yeah, we're going to back out because of the appraisal, guess what? You now have to give a copy of that appraisal to the seller. Guess what, though? If you give them a copy of that appraisal, does that make that now material fact that they need to share that? Thank you, Stacy. Yes, that was very important. All right. Any questions before I go on to the other items? So if buyer cancels due to the appraisal contingency, seller is entitled to a copy of that appraisal. All right, page 6, title contingency. And we talked about this. If a revised prelim report is provided, buyer may cancel if there are material deviations from the original title report. Paragraph 8G, revised review of leased. We already talked about this. Talked about that already. Paragraph 6, 9, B number 2, existing items included, window coverings defined to include blinds, curtains, drapes, shutters, and other coverings, or any part of the window. This one took us about 4 hours to go back and forth. It was an interesting conversation. Pool and spa equipment defined to include pool cleaners, nets, and covers. Regular and smart light bulbs are now included. Let me repeat that. Regular and smart light bulbs are included. Sellers should be cautious about stage items and exclude them if listed in this paragraph. So we've had situations where people thought that certain items were included, but they were owned by the stager, and that has caused some issues. Paragraph 9B, number 5, non-dedicated control devices. Buyer is advised to change passwords. Paragraph 9B, number 7, items transferred without warranty, regardless of value, see paragraph 9A, shall not cooperate with buyer to identify software and arrange for transfer of services. So if you've got some fancy and schmancy, what was one? Irrigation system, but the buyer is going to cooperate to identify the software, and they're going to now arrange for the transfer of the services. So, certain type of alarm systems, you just can't do it unless the buyer cooperates. And we've seen where, the buyers, the property may have gone sour, some feelings may have been hurt, and people don't want to deal with that stuff. You are now contractually obligated to do so. Paragraph 9, continuing on 9C, brackets will be removed and the holes will be repaired. Going on to page 7, paragraph 10B, number 1, legally required installations, smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, and securing water heater to be done within 7 days. If buyer to pay, either deposit funds with escrow or pay service provider directly. If seller to pay and not done on time, seller shall pay for costs buyer incurs to comply with the lender requirements.
Will, I have a question.
Yeah.
And I'm asking as a non-agent, so please forgive me, everyone. That last one about repairing holes. Now, let's say you've got this red wall or a green wall, and now you've patched all those little holes with white spackle. Do you leave it like that, or are you also required to paint it so that it doesn't have white spackle spots all over it?
You are only obligated to fill the holes.
Wow, okay. So, I'm sorry, I'd be upset if I bought a house with a green wall and then it was a polka dot green wall. That's just me though.
Well, hey, I mean, this is why you have final verification, that you verify all of this stuff. Kimberly asked, please clarify, if buyer cancels contract due to appraisal, is the seller obligated to disclose appraisal to other buyers? I assume yes, but want to verify. So that is a good question. So I guess, Kimberly, my question to you is that now a new material fact? Answer is yes. You would want to, you would have to disclose that to another buyer. That's why doing these type of things can get tricky. Yeah, it does seem like a new material fact. Paragraph 10B, 2A, point of sale requirements. Boo. Paragraph applies whether law requires work done before or after close of escrow if buyer to pay either deposit funds with escrow or pay service provider directly. If seller to pay for smoke alarms, carbon monoxide devices, and secure water heater, but not done on time, the lender needs a reinspection, then the seller to pay for reinspection fee. Let me repeat that. If seller to pay for smoke alarms and carbon monoxide devices and secure water heater, but not done on time, and lender needs a reinspection, the seller to pay for the reinspection fee. Hot tip for everybody, I always on any of my listings, I make sure that I take a photo and I have the date on the photo showing that the water heater was date and strat. We used to have a rash a couple of years ago of some of these appraisers coming in and saying, oh yeah, it wasn't done. You need, I've got to charge you again for that to happen. All right, paragraph 10C, the home warranty, buyer.
Oops. Oops.
Will
The
you there?
coverage within-
Oh,
yeah.
there you are. Okay, you froze for a second. I wasn't sure if you were reading a question, so I was like pausing. But I think
Oh,
you froze.
okay.
Okay.
Well, where did I pause? Did you hear me talk about 10C, home warranty?
Yeah, do 10C.
All right, so 10C, buyer chooses the coverage within the amount allowed. If the plan exceeds the amount seller is to pay for under the contract, buyer is to pay for the difference. So if you agree to 500 and it comes to 575, seller's going to pay for the 500. The buyer then kicks in the extra $75. Paragraph 11, separate references for these two requirements. This is the home fire hardening and the defensible space. The new form is referenced the FHDS, the fire hardening and defensible space advisory disclosure and addendum. That was an addendum that I have received probably 50 or 60 calls on over the past year since that's been proposed and put into practice. Paragraph 11H, natural hazard and environmental hazards, explicit statement that residential earthquake risk disclosure, the questionnaire booklet to be provided. Paragraph 11, escrow is instructed to withhold unless an exemption applies. Documentation of exemption must comply with federal or state law as applicable. A statement from escrow or title that is not done under penalty of perjury does not satisfy legal requirements for federal withholding. Paragraph 11M talks about known material facts. Added an explicit disclosure obligation for material facts. Before we move on to page 9. You're welcome, Kelly. Page 9, paragraph 12B, buyer investigation. Buyer investigation separated into 3 categories: inspections regarding physical attributes to the property. These include the home inspection, lead paint inspection, wood destroying pest inspection, also known as the termites, inspections regarding any other items. Examples include permits and neighborhood noise, and review of reports and disclosures, the C.A.R. form, RR, that's the request for repairs, and contingency removal are being modified to reflect these 3 categories of buyer investigation so that some can be removed without removal of the entire investigation contingency. Paragraph D12, the buyer reports. Buyer is not obligated to deliver appraisal reports to seller. However, again, if buyer is using the appraisal to cancel pursuant to an appraisal contingency, the seller is entitled to the report. So we state it once again. Paragraph 13A, the title, the preliminary report. The person paying for the title insurance policy shall provide buyer with the prelim within the specified time. If that person is the buyer shall act in good faith to obtain the report in a timely manner. Going to paragraph 13E, still on title here, but we're talking about the geographic targeting order. Cash or non-loan purchases of $300,000 or more of parties in certain counties, such as LA County and San Francisco, trigger reporting requirements if the buyer is an entity purchaser. The purpose of this is to detect criminal activity. Buyer agrees to cooperate with title if the issue is relevant for the property being sold. So if people are putting it in their LLCs or their trusts in some of these counties, you're buying it in all cash, you need to comply with some of those requirements. Paragraph 13F, still untitled, talking about the recorded documents. Buyer shall provide post-closing mailing address to the county recorder for purposes of receiving receipt of the recordation. Continuing with the title section, paragraph 13G, the homeowner's policy versus the standard policy. If a homeowner's policy is not available, by default, buyer will receive the CLTA standard coverage policy unless the buyer agrees to pay the difference for a different policy. And then paragraph 14C and D, seller and buyer credits to cancel. Subparagraphs for cancellation rights based on contingencies or cancellation rights are now easily identifiable. Paragraph 14E, notices to perform. This is a change, guys. It's very subtle. The earliest time to give a notice to perform is based on scheduled, not considering the extra Saturday, Sunday, and legal holiday days allowable, taking into account extra Saturday, Sunday, and legal holidays, performance date. So note, no option to change it from 2 days. So you can't make it less. Now you can't make it less, but before you were able to make it, more than 2 days. Now that option has been removed. An incorrectly delivered notice to perform, for example, if one is delivered too early, is invalid, and a new notice to perform is given at the applicable time, has to be delivered to be effective. Okay, so if you deliver it early, it's non-enforceable. You have to deliver it again on time. And again, same thing, paragraph 14G, it's the same language, but again, it's now stating that you can't change it from through.
I think it's gonna come back in a second. Give him a minute. That's what happened last time. But until he
3
comes
days
back,
to 4.
there we go. Start back, you talk about number 3. Talk about options from day 3. Your first.
I'm sorry, my internet's acting wonky.
That's okay.
So again, 14G is the same as before, but now we're talking about close of escrow. Again, you don't have an option to change it. So it's 3 days. On the current thing, you couldn't change it to less than 3 days, but you could make it 4 or 5 or however many days, because that was allowable. Now, default, no change. And same thing, if you send them, one that's on the second day, that's not enforceable. You've got to do it within the time frame that has been allowed. In this case, it is 3 days. Paragraph 14A.
His internet went wonky again, but he'll get to paragraph 14H in just a moment. There we go.
All right, so I plugged in. This should not happen again.
Okay.
All right, paragraph 14H, effective cancellation. A note has been added at the end to remind the parties that neither agents nor escrow holders can determine which party is entitled to the deposited funds following a cancellation. So again, another thing that I always hear agents say, X happens. Oh yeah, you will be entitled to the deposit or the earnest money deposit. Folks, if you are in this room with me right now, I want you to think about this and never, ever do that. The phrase that you would say is the deposit at that point is at risk. Don't tell them, oh, you get the deposit or you will lose a deposit. Don't be definitive. Say that it will be at risk because it is at risk, but we don't know if the whole thing is at risk, half of it is at risk or whatever. So please, 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 please bear that in mind. So we're on the home stretch here, paragraph 12, page 12, I'm sorry, paragraph 19, joint escrow instructions, language included as a reminder that the contract is valid even if escrow holder does not sign. The escrow holder has an affirmative obligation to provide a legally compliant qualified substitute statement to comply with FERPTA if seller provides escrow with a legally compliant affidavit. If not, the parties instruct escrow to withhold the applicable amount and send to the IRS, referring back to paragraph 11G. Great question, George. Some of these changes to the timeframes are contractual. Are any of these timeframes by statute? Some of them are. So some of them you do have statutory time. Well, no, actually, the timelines are contractual, but some of the disclosures are statutory. So there is a difference there. So great question, George. All right. And yes, Victor, you'll be able there. If you look in the chat, there should be a PDF to the contract as well. We will provide the PDF to you at the end, and the video should be available hopefully very soon when we're done. I think Jody said in a couple of days, right, Jody?
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, paragraph 19E, language added as a reminder that escrow will not pay bills without an invoice. Paragraph 21, the MLS, language added to inform parties that images, the photos, videos, and floor plans on the internet cannot be taken down by either buyer or seller's broker or the MLS. We were getting a lot of requests for this language to be put in, so we did put it in. Paragraph 23, assignment. Buyer does not need seller permission to assign the contract to wholly owned entity or trust. And if so, the assigning entity or trust does not need to re-sign documents. For other assignees, buyer shall disclose the amount of compensation received. If buyer does not notify seller of an assignment within 17 days after acceptance, seller may refuse to give consent to the assignment and seller's refusal will be considered reasonable. So if Will and Jody were buying a property and we sign as Will and Jody, but we decide that we want to transfer this to a trust and assign it to a trust, we can do that. But if Will buys this property and decides to wholesale it and sell it to Jody as a new buyer, and Will's going to make $10,000, I have to disclose that, and the seller needs to be disclosed to the seller as well. And yay, the video will be posted at the end of the week. Awesome. Thank you, Jody. Yes, we will, Tam. We will share the PDF, not the slide, not the Adobe, not the PowerPoint, but the PDF of the slideshow. Definition and instructions in acceptance. Delivery of acceptance may be made to a party's authorized agent, even if no name provided in offer paragraph. Must be to a name in the broker box. Definitions and instructions. As is contains an explanation that as is means seller shall disclose and buyer has a right to inspect. So again, even if you come in non-contingent for inspections, you are still allowed a right to inspect. That does affect, though, any rights that you may have had to ask for repairs or negotiate. Paragraph 25E, definitions and instructions. Continuing authorized agent, an individual real estate licensee named in the broker section. Page 13, paragraph 25I, definitions, instructions, counting days. Examples for given on counting days for performance. First partial date is not counted. Last date ends at 12:59 p.m. So again, I always tell people, if we get into contract today, today is not day one. Today is considered day zero. Tomorrow is day one. Includes definition of scheduled performance date. The calendar date an event should happen without considering delays due to Saturday, Sunday, or legal holidays. Includes definition of allowable performance date. The calendar date an event is permitted to happen after taking into account delays due to a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holidays. Definition 25K, deliver, delivered, or delivery. Personal receipt can be by a party or authorized agent. Sending a document to the email, text number, or other address provided is sufficient. Providing actual receipt or opening the document is not required. I'm not wonking out. I'm waiting for the questions because this is a huge one. This is a huge change. Let me repeat that. Personal receipt can be by party or authorized agent. Sending a document to the email, text number, or other address provided is sufficient. Providing actual receipt or opening the document is not required. Again, if I send it to you through as a PDF to your phone as a text, or if I email it to you, it is considered delivered. That's a huge change, folks. So take that into consideration. I'm surprised I haven't gotten any questions on that yet. Might just be sinking in. So if I'm sending you a notice to perform, you can't duck and run. If I send it to the email that you provided in the contract, or your text number that we've been communicating for the last X amount of days, you've gotten it. You don't even have to open it. You've gotten it because I can show a receipt that I sent it to you.
Oh, okay. I have a question.
Go for it.
Does that mean that this includes holidays and because you said proving actual receipt is not required, does that include the holidays or special holidays or something like that?
For when it's delivered, or are you talking about when we're counting days?
Yeah. When you said proving actual receipt is not or opening is not required, does that mean that it, what do you call it?
Doesn't matter if it's a holiday and I send it to you. It does not matter if it's a holiday. Delivery does not matter if it's on a holiday. Now, what you may be thinking about is the actual document itself, and if it's counting the days, that's a separate issue. Delivery has nothing to do with this. This definition of delivery has nothing to do about when I send it. It's that I sent it. Does that answer your question, Victor?
Yeah, I just wondered if holidays were exempt from that.
No, because it's not. Remember, I can send you something at any time, but you got it. It's been delivered to you. Now, you're probably thinking, well, if there's a demand to close escrow, that's separate. I can deliver it to you today, but if I've already calculated the appropriate days when that third day happens, then that's a moot point. When I delivered it is a moot point. It has been delivered to you. How do
Okay.
you prove a text message or email is delivered? For an email, you go to send. You can go into your inbox, your outbox, or all your sent items, and it's there. You just print it out and it shows when you sent it. Same thing for your text messages. Your text messages tell you when you sent something to somebody. That's how you know if you know what time you sent it. So
But
yes,
what, but do you have to tell when it was opened, when the other party opened it?
let me
If the,
repeat. Personal
yeah.
receipt can be by party or authorized agent. Sending a document to the email, text number, or receipt address provided is sufficient. Providing actual receipt or opening the document is not required.
Oh,
So
okay.
no, it is not.
Okay. Mm.
So you should, just to be on the safe side, you could go ahead and email it and then send a text saying, check your email box. I just sent you some documents. And that kind of makes it kind of doubled up on
That would be the professional thing.
Oh, oh, oh.
That would be the professional thing to do, Grace.
And people say I'm not professional.
Nobody says that. All right. All right. And again, delivered. I put that there twice because it is that nice. And I knew we were going to get questions on that. Because we say it and then people are like, wait, what? One more here. I'm surprised about the text message proves delivery, as texts aren't as permanent and more difficult to store. A screenshot of a PDF sent by text would just say Tuesday rather than an actual date. Interesting change. Well, if it says Tuesday, let me take a look. I mean, when we looked at it, so I got a text. So I just got a text because we ordered DoorDash, and a photo came in, says today at 12:41. But I've got texts that are going back and that they give me the dates and the time when I got that those things.
I think it goes, sorry to interrupt, but after a week. So if it's last, what day is it today? It's Wednesday. If I sent something up until last Thursday, it will say the day of the week until a week has passed. I'm not saying that clearly, but it doesn't actually add the date until a whole week has passed. So if you were to deliver a contract and then take a screenshot to prove your delivery, it's going to say Wednesday. It's not going to say the actual date unless you screenshot it a week later. Do you know what I'm saying?
I'm looking at my texts and I've received text. Let's see if my sent text. Well, I haven't sent out texts since August 1st. So that's not a week. It says August 1st on it. Things that I have sent August 3rd. So today is the 4th. I haven't sent out anything. I've just received text and it only has times on it. So when you send a text or receive a text the next day, it's going to show you the date. But when you send it, it should show it to you the day of.
So as
But
Ray
even
says,
if
and
you
this
have
is
to
true,
wait-
settings in individual phones. So you definitely want to make sure that you do that. All right, let's move on. Paragraph 25. Oh, otherwise agreed. Defined term, which means the agreement is in writing, signed by both parties and delivered to each. Legally authorized signer replaces the representative capacity paragraph, but the terms remain the same, such as acting for the entity only and not as an individual, applying to signatures and additional initials, and the entity already exists. Page 14, paragraph 29, liquidated damages, boxed to see more easily. The required initial blocks refers to renamed Form DID for increased deposits. See paragraph 5A2. Paragraph 31, arbitration on disputes. Paragraph is boxed to make it more noticeable and easily see the required initial blocks. Page 15, paragraph 32A, the offer expiration, delivery of signed acceptance may be made to buyer's authorized agent, even if the blank field is not completed. Paragraph 32B, the entity buyers, optional paragraph that can be used instead of the separate RCSD form. It identifies the type of entity, name of entity, the name of the legally authorized signer. If programming is possible, name of legally authorized signer will autofill in signature section below. So we're still working with zip form to do this, because we do get that as a complaint that when people are using entities or whatever, that it doesn't show up. The workaround that I've used would be if you go into Win Forms, there's a parties tab. You go into the parties tab and you do it there. And that seems to work out the best way. Paragraph 32, number C, the offer, we're talking about the pages. A reminder is included of the number of pages in the RPA and responsibility of the buyer to read each and all attachments, because we wanted to make sure that people couldn't come back and say, oh, well, they just told me to sign with my DocuSign, and I just went click, 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 and I didn't read. No, we're having a section here that says that you actually read that stuff. The buyer signatures of the offer, the first line always needs to be signed either by the individual buyer or the legally authorized person for any of those entity buyers. The second line will always be completed with the printed name of the buyer, whether an individual or an entity. And the third line is optional and only completed if a legal authorized person is signing. And then the acceptance line in paragraph 33, acceptance can be subject to a counteroffer, a backup, addendum, or both. Paragraph 33B, acceptance, and we're talking about our entity sellers, optional paragraph that can be used instead of the separate RCSD form. It identifies the type of entity, the name of the entity, and name of legally authorized signer. If programming again is possible, the name of the legally authorized signer will autofill in the signature section below. And again, we talk about the pages again, this time coming from both sides. We want to make sure that they know how many pages and what they're signing. Paragraph 33D, for the seller signature, the first line always needs to be signed by, again, the seller this time, or the legal person that's authorized to sign on behalf of an entity seller. The second line, again, will always be completed with the printed name of the seller, whether an individual or an entity. And the third line, again, is optional and only completed if a legally authorized person is signing. And notice at the box, and again, I always, tell my people that I'm training on the contracts, we're professionals. We get paid very well. Let's not leave anybody hanging. It's just rude. If you're not going to accept their offer, you're not going to counter offer them, go ahead and have the seller's initial. This is good because then it proves that you did present the offer. And the language is changed to an offer not accepted instead of saying that it was rejected. And our final page, real estate broker section, paragraph 5, A, that's the agent signatures. Again, optional sentence and reference to form AAA if more than one agent from the same broker firm is representing the buyer. Optional sentence and reference to the form ABA if more than one brokerage firm is representing the buyer. An optional sentence if buyer's authorized agent wants delivery to be made to an alternate address only, and because information may autofill from the MLS. So this is an example of this is, so if we get into contract, if Grace and I get into a contract, Grace and I, and if I'm the listing agent, Grace is going to send all of her corresponding emails to me to my email address, will@williamchea.com. But before we get into contract, if I want people to send their offers to me, they're going to send it to offers@williamchea.com. That's the example, right? Now that's, for me, that's changed. I just have everybody send it through Disclosures.io because it's even better at tracking. It's more efficient that way. But this is for people that have that option that they want you to send it, the offers to one address, but then all corresponding documents and correspondence will be sent to a separate address, email address. 5A agent signatures, an optional sentence. Oh, so good, I repeated it twice. Escrow holder acknowledgement, name change from the Department of Business Oversight to the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation for independent escrow regulatory body. The second line will always be completed with the printed name of the seller, whether an individual or an entity. And the third line is optional, only completed if a legally authorized person is signing. So with that, folks, knowledge is a tool, and like all tools, its impact is in the hands of the user. I always love this quote. I'm always ending with that. And do any of you have any questions for my answers?
I have a
Laura
question.
Welch.
Yeah. Could you give, just to make sure I have this correct in my head, could you give an example on 32D? If I'm Laura Welch and I'm buying for ABC LLC as the CFO, what would that look like?
So then you're going to be signing as the authorized person of that entity as the CEO, not as yourself, the person.
So yeah, what I'm asking is where on where it says signature by, what's going to be there?
So you're going to be on the second line. You're going to sign on the second line. With the I should say you're always going to sign on the first time, but the second line will always be completed with, you know, either, and in this case, it would be the name of the entity.
So the entity goes in there.
Correct. If it's an entity, that's where that name would go. If it was just you as the person, just your name would go there. But because you're signing as the person that's authorized, and in this case, I love how you said CEO, you would make sure that you put that title in there, like how you would put for, you know, you sign like TT or trustee. You would want to put CEO because then you're showing that it's another way of you showing that you're signing it as an officer of the entity and not as you, the person.
So just to repeat to make sure that I have this correct. So the signature by would be my name, Laura Welch. And the third line would be ABC LLC, comma CEO.
No, the second line would be Laura Welch, ABCDE, CEO. But you would, I mean, you could, I mean, in the third line, again, it's optional, but you could put your name again as the CEO of the entity.
Okay.
Because that's why we put it there, you know, as it being optional.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let's take a look at some of these questions.
Dave Walsh has his hand up, and then I know there's one in the chat box.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, thanks, Will. Great presentation, by the way. If anybody hasn't gotten the message through this presentation that you need to log into Gov Hutchinson's 4-hour class, hopefully you get that message, because this is a significantly changed document. So, you know, these questions that I'm watching coming through the chat, the questions that have been posted all the way along are very good questions that need to be handled by attorneys, not by agent knowledge or agent lore, right? So please sign up for the course. It's $55 if I remember my numbers correctly through Jody's presentation.
You're correct, sir.
It's coming up in a couple weeks, and there is continuing education credit attached to that. So I didn't see that in the sign up sheet for Gov, but there is, to my knowledge, 4 hours of CE credit as well. So you get something for your investment. But bottom line is this is a significantly changed document. So please, everybody participate, because I can imagine how difficult it's going to be for those of you that have not taken a class to receive this offer, and how confusing it's going to be for things going backwards and forwards. So thank you, Will, for this effort, and thank you, Jody, for putting this together.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Dave, for giving me the opportunity to serve you as our president of C.A.R. It was an amazing time, and thank you for that opportunity.
Very welcome.
Any questions? Thank you for the platitudes, folks, but any questions?
There was a question, and Dave may be referencing this to ask Gov, but what was the conversation and or reasoning behind allowing a seller to contact a buyer's lender?
That was something that came up fairly early in the process, because you get unfortunately you get bad actors that don't communicate with everybody for whatever reason or another. And again, it's just to promote professionalism. Like if you communicate enough, this should not become a problem. Now, I know everybody says, well, it's going to be. I contend with you again that if you, as the buyer's agent, communicate with the other side frequently enough, you will not have your seller calling, the lender and perhaps ticking off the lender or whoever. If everybody communicates, you have a smooth, even when it's going bad and people communicate, it's not as bad. I've been in some seriously contentious deals. And when you step back away from it, you go, wow, we really communicated. And if we weren't communicating, this could have been much worse. So it's all about talking to the other side, folks. Just because, the technology today is set up so that everybody doesn't talk to everybody. This is when, you're talking about, especially here, 1.16 is our average now. $1.5 million. And you're not going to talk to people? You're not going to update them? We're better than that, folks. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Are there any expected changes to this version that you shared with us today before its official release?
We do not expect it, because it was done before the July deadline, which meant that I had to go and that really, really thick book that we get, that had to go to the printer by July. So this is the final version for now. We did have a big thing that we were going to have to revise. For those of you that keep up with the news on our industry, the Department of Justice, the settlement agreement about buyer side compensation and making that public. We don't have that. We don't have that anymore. So we're not going to have to touch that anymore. So that's a great question. And if you aren't happy with this, that's fine. We still welcome comments and suggestions to this, and we as a committee will still look at everybody's questions, comments, concerns, etc. All right. Let's see. So the primary reason behind contacting the buyer's lender is lack of communication or promoting communication, so seller does not have to contact the buyer's lender. Yeah. If everybody's communicating, there should be no need for a seller to call the buyer's lender. Why would a seller want to communicate to the buyer's lender? Because they're not hearing what's going on with this loan. If they don't know what's going on, they're going to be curious. If the listing agent keeps calling the buyer's agent or even the lender and they're not getting any response or any answers, that's why.
Will, I just want to be the devil's advocate.
Sure.
Normal. there are some sellers that don't believe what you're saying. And so they may go ahead and call the lender. If they're harassing the lender, I mean, you have to communicate with your seller as well. saying,
Absolutely.
this is an option for you if we're not hearing back from the agent, or if I'm not getting any answers, then you may call. However, if you call continuously, you may jeopardize that transaction, because the lender is not going to either answer your call, and things are going to just get out of hand. So you have to make sure not only to communicate with each other as agents, and tell the agent, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent, whatever, two heads are better. If you're having an issue and you can't resolve it in a couple of days, call me. I will help you work with it. Maybe I can come up with an answer. But you need to have that communication. And unfortunately, talking is not the primary way of communicating anymore. And that should be part of your communication, because it really projects what is really happening. Because you can't read a text or an email and really listen to what the voice is telling you. So I'm old school. I'd rather talk to you. So, but there are some sellers that might just go ahead and do it no matter what you're telling them. So just be aware.
Yep, just be aware. And then it's about your communicating with your sellers, and you tell them, look, if they've got a contingency, then we can send them a notice to perform at the appropriate time. And again, if you're a listing agent, this is why, you always want to make sure that you've got a backup offer ready to go, or keep in contact with those people that had put offers in, so that, just in case something should happen, you've got to get out, you've got somebody ready to go in, and take over that transaction for you.
There was one question in here. It says, did you make reference to the PRDS and this new RPA? And I don't believe you did. I'm gonna assume the question may mean this is the RPA which C.A.R. uses, but does this have
Correct.
anything to do with PRDS?
This has nothing to do. PRDS is its own separate entity there with C.A.R.
Yep.
Those are the forms that C.A.R. uses. This is the form that C.A.R. uses, that Santa Clara County Association uses. This is the form that we use. You can use PRDS if you want to. That's up to you. But this is the C.A.R. form. I will say, though, that we did have a gentleman that is a very high up ranking person that works for PRDS as a part of our forms committee, as part of the work study group, and he's also a part of the forms committee as well. So I think we are about 7 minutes or 8 minutes over our allotted time,
You went
Jody.
till 3, so we're good.
Oh, we're good. Excellent. Excellent. Well, I mean, if we don't have any other questions.
Yeah, I will. I have the PDF of this, and we will get this recording over to our production coordinator. It does take some time, believe it or not, to go through this and just make sure it's in a good place. I'll make sure to include the link again for everybody so that you do have a copy again of the draft. As Dave encouraged, I encouraged, as Will is encouraging, please do take the class. If you choose not to take it with SCORP, not a problem, but you are strongly encouraged to take it with one of the C.A.R. legal team who will be teaching this class. I know Neil Kalin's teaching it. I will tell you that if you take it through C.A.R., it's $75. If you take it with another AOR, it's another price. If you take it with us, it's $55. So I'll put the link in the chat box again. That will be recorded. And if you do pay for the class, you do get the recording of that class so that you can go back and listen to it again. Any final thoughts, Will or Dave? Do you have any final thoughts?
Thank you very much, everybody. Really, really appreciate everybody coming out today. Hopefully we got through this and answered everybody's questions. Again, this was not meant to train you on the contract. This was just to talk about, some of the important things that you've got to keep an eye out on. Definitely, invest. And again, I go back to that slide with the axe. This is your axe, folks. This is where our money is made, with a negotiation. This is where, you learn this stuff. And if your buyer makes a not informed decision against what you advise them, if you know the contract, you might be able to help them get out of that situation and become a rock star. And then they will listen to you the next time. I've done it a lot. Trust me, it works. I know Dave does it a lot sometimes, and they're like, wow, you really saved me. How? Because we know the contracts. Guys, it's all about these contracts. Get in there, learn them. And this is where we make our money, folks. It was my distinct honor and pleasure to meet with you guys today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. This is what I'm here for. Thank you so much, guys. God bless, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.